the difference between noise and grain effect in an image, and what an image looks like. So Ritchie has kindly set up 2 images of basically the same scene. The one is exactly the same image, I think, just processed differently, and the other one is an image with high and low ISO. So we want to just have a look how that looks, and why there is such a thing like noise reduction, etc., etc.
So I guess it would be important to talk about like what is noise, and basically in the film days you had grain, you had actual grain, and we'll talk about grain in a moment. And the grain would be bigger in the higher ISO films because it would need to be more sensitive to light. In your digital camera, you're basically the processor is pushing the data, which is causing artifacts that are called noise. And typically, noise is not something you want in your pictures. That's always been the rule of thumb. And the higher ISO you get, the more noise you get. But Fujifilm has programmed their cameras a little bit differently, and noise doesn't look so awful like it does in a lot of brands. They tend to desaturize it, and it has more of a film grain look to it. It doesn't seem so digital and maybe a little bit more analog.
Yeah. So
with that said, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to explain to the viewers that the image that they're looking at now is a zoomed in version of the full picture, so that you can quite clearly see on the left image with noise, especially in the sky. You can see the noise grains and not in the image.
And that's a good point. When you're looking at it on like Instagram, Facebook, that kind of stuff, viewing it small, the difference is negligible. You can't hardly tell the difference between an image with noise and without. But when you zoom in, view it larger, print it larger, it'll become a lot more obvious. Like you can see here in this crop, the image on the left is ISO 6400. The image on the right is ISO 640. So it's a pretty big difference. And the one at ISO 640 hardly has any noise in it at all. And this is with noise reduction set to -4 on both images. The one on the left with the noise, what was that?
I would like to know from the viewers if they can see it as clearly. I mean, we can see it clearly. We know what we're looking for, and we're probably looking at possibly a bigger screen. And just if the audience just can tell us that they can see a difference, and if they can comment on it and give us thumbs up, that would be super awesome.
Yeah, and if this was the film era, the image on the right would more resemble like a slide with a low ISO, like 50 or 64, as far as how the noise looks. The image on the left would be more like maybe closer to ISO 400 film, how the grain would look. The noise kind of resembles that a little bit.
Yeah. So let's have a look at what an image looks like with a lot of grain. Because I find it interesting that looking at them, it looks kind of like similar-ish.
So the one on the right has no grain, and both of these are ISO 64 or 640. I'm sorry, ISO 640. So there isn't very much noise being added to it. It's a very clean image to start with. So the one on the right has 0 grain. The one on the left is strong and large. And again, this is zoomed in. That's a little bit more subtle than looking at the noise.
But it's still so grain is something. Grain is something that we add to the recipe because we want it to look more like film.
Yeah, in the film days, it was actual silver grain that you saw. In the digital era, we don't have that. We have noise, which is kind of sort of an equivalent. But Fujifilm has given us the tool to apply a fake film grain to the image that's supposed to resemble actual film grain.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to take the one out and put the other one in order to get our digital images to look more like film. And Lenny's
actually
that you can that it's very clear to see. So I'm happy
Yeah. And you can actually use both effects to your advantage. For example, the Kodak Tri-X 400 SOP requires you to use a higher ISO to get that noise and apply a strong film grain to it. So you're using both together to try and mimic the graininess of film.
Yes. So here's a bit of an exercise that you can try at home. You can, take those film simulations that have very high grain and some that have very low grain, and just, compare them and see what you like better. Oh,
Yeah, and I think
Robbie's back.
Robbie's comment here is very much, you see it mostly in the sky or in an area where it's kind of the same tone, even tone across is where you'll mostly see both noise and grain.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So it's great that you can all see that, and it's great that you also letting us know. So it's working for us and for you. Okay, and someone is watching on the iPad where they cannot see the difference.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if the smaller you're viewing it, the less of a difference it'll make. And so using a higher ISO is definitely no issue at all if you're never going to view the picture bigger than, let's say, on social media or something like that. But if you wanted to print it on, make a mural on your wall, then you'd probably want to stick with like a low ISO to just to make it as clean as possible.
Yeah. Yes. So it's definitely worth an exercise. So everyone who's not like Kathy, for example, she kind of sees a difference. She's watching on a laptop. Everybody else is probably watching on a computer screen and is looking at a bigger image. So why don't you try that at home and see for yourself? It's quite obvious when you, especially, turning the grain on and off. You can even in camera, you can convert. You go back to last month's show where we showed you how to convert a JPEG in camera, and there you can use the same image and you convert it once with no grain and then with strong grain, and then you will see the difference.